Welcome to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. And now your host, Tim Johnson.
We'll talk to one of our state's most impressive entrepreneurs when Terry Simmons, founder, president, and CEO of T. Simmons & Company, joins us when we return on this edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Louisiana businesses, by partnering with your local community and technical college foundation, you're guaranteed a skilled, highly competent workforce, homegrown talent, trained specifically to meet your needs, whatever those needs are. Visit this website to learn more about how to partner with your local Louisiana Community and Technical College Foundation. To better prepare for tomorrow, become a partner today.
Protect yourself from the headaches of dealing with a non-licensed contractor. Go to lacontractor.org and make sure the person or company who wants to work for you is licensed by the Louisiana State Licensing Board for Contractors. It's your money. Make wise decisions and protect yourself.
Growing up in Baton Rouge, I used to always pass up ExxonMobil, but I never thought that I would actually have the opportunity to get on. But what I thought was impossible turned out to be possible. So I just feel like it's just a wonderful opportunity to be able to provide for my family.
We are committed to being a community partner. We are actively working to recruit the talent here in Baton Rouge, and we want to bring them into our workforce. We're ready.
Louisiana has over 26,000 licensed companies that do business legally and meet the needs of our state. Before selecting a contractor, check references and verify the license at lacontractor.org. It's your money. Make wise decisions and protect yourself from being scammed.
For 8 seconds in the arena before an afternoon in the field. For a promise to students that honors success in the classroom. For championships earned on the bayou. For innovators committed to reclaiming our coastline. The Universities of Louisiana. For your future. For our future.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Terry Simmons, one of the state's bright and aggressive entrepreneurs, is our guest. You know, we've known each other for years, and not sure why you haven't been on the television show.
I'm getting older, you're not.
I don't know about that, buddy, but listen, I introduced you as an entrepreneur, one of our state's brightest and most aggressive entrepreneurs. We're going to talk about a lot of the stuff you do, Terry, a lot of the very impressive stuff you do, particularly around social media and some things. But to get started, I want our audience to know the Terry Simmons story, your background, your upbringing, your education. And then we'll sort of talk about the path that led you to entrepreneurship.
Good deal. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm always surprised when people are interested in what I have to say, but it's a blessing to be here. Grew up in Reserve, Louisiana. And, I've been a Louisianian all my life. And I'm always surprised when people don't know where, Reserve is. But I guess I get it. We don't have our own exit. If you're heading towards New Orleans, you either got to get off in St. James Parish or you got to get off in Laplace. But I had a really, really rich upbringing. When I say rich, I mean in terms of experiences. So we didn't necessarily have a lot of money, working class family. My mother and father divorced when I was 5, maintained a good relationship. My stepdad, amazing provider, worked in the petrochemical industry for almost 30 years. And just, salt of the earth type people, man, in Reserve. My upbringing was unique in the sense that I tell people this all the time, when we talk about, the baby boomer legacy, well, I'm Gen X, right? So I think our legacy is a little bit more ambiguous than the baby boomers are. But, when you think about a lot of the social and political change that was happening during that era, I tell people this all the time. Well, I had to go live it out, right? So, being a 70s baby and, my mom made a decision early on in my academic career, I think I was in 2nd grade, to send me to St. Peter's Catholic school, which at the time was predominantly white, right? So it was a culture shock for me. But it was the best thing that could have happened to me because, I lived in a neighborhood that was 100% African-American. And I went to schools that were probably 95% European American. So it gave me a perspective that I tell people this all the time. It was the best social education that I could have gotten because it really positioned me to do the work that I do now. and to be able to understand people culturally?
Well, I'm always fascinated by where people grow up. You know, I made no secret about it on this television show that I grew up in a little small town called Pine Prairie, 750 people, 32 kids in my senior class. And I wouldn't change that rural upbringing, sort of that little bit tougher, had to scrape and scrap a little bit for what we got, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. But I want to talk about entrepreneurship, Terry, because I mean this sincerely. I am fascinated by what you do and how you do it. I am a big fan of your work and of your company and of particularly the way you market your firm. But let's talk about that. What drew you initially to entrepreneurship?
So I think I knew early on, but when you grow up in a community like Reserve, you don't have access to entrepreneurs. Everyone works in petrochemical industry, agriculture, wildlife fisheries, they work in oil and gas. And so I didn't know that it was a thing, if that might sound crazy, but the entrepreneurs that I knew were more solopreneurs, and they had a craft that they were monetizing. They didn't necessarily have companies. I was a pretty good athlete in high school, had an opportunity to play football at NLU at the time. But I'm obviously not a big guy, right? So my speed and agility was the thing that kind of was my ticket. And I had two pretty difficult knee injuries, back to back, 2 years apart. And so my focus shifted from athletics, but I needed somewhere to redirect that competitive energy. And so I had a chance meeting with a very young entrepreneur that was successful in that region. And I had about an hour-long conversation with him that changed my perspective on my entire life. And so I became an entrepreneur that day. I went home.
You made the decision that day.
I made the decision that day because he reshaped the purpose of education for me. And so I value education. I do a lot of workforce development. So I'm out advocating for post-secondary education all the time. But I recognized that what I was in school and what I was doing was not necessarily conducive to where I was headed at that moment. And so I still ended up getting my degree, but ultimately I was like, you're an entrepreneur. So I went home that summer and I worked 3 jobs. I don't know if you remember back in the day, they had JTPA, the job training.
Remember.
I worked a JTPA job. I worked as in dietary at the River Parishes Hospital, and we had a dollar theater, and I worked the nights and evenings there, and saved enough money to start what was my first business. And I was in promotions initially. I was in promoting concerts and parties and different events because at 19, that was low-hanging fruit for me. I was a pretty popular guy, and so I felt like I could fill a room. And so from there, I transitioned into an imprintable sportswear business that ballooned for me very quickly. But as great as I was at sales and the creative side, supply chain management, horrible at it. Accounting, horrible at it, things like that. So I learned some valuable lessons through those early stage businesses that I had that kind of shaped where I am now.
We've got about 20 seconds left in this. I'm going to ask you this quickly and we can pick it up when we come back. But you mentioned your mother, you mentioned your stepdad, you mentioned this chance meeting with this individual. Just briefly, who's someone else that has inspired you in your journey?
I don't know. These are some people that the viewers may not know. Don Cornelius is one that inspired me.
Soul Train, right?
He was able to, and it wasn't about the show. It was about the fact that he actually created a monopoly,
right,
and he was able to captivate a market that was underserved at the time, and was able to get a lot of corporate dollars to market products to that.
We'll pick this up and talk more about it, but it always is interesting to me to hear folks that, the path that you followed, the people that you've aspired to be like. We'll talk more about that when we come back. We're visiting with Terry Simmons. He's the president, founder, and CEO of T. Simmons & Company. You're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.
Shell, the rhythm of Louisiana.
As humankind faces its most critical challenges yet, The world demands leaders, and LSU is taking up the charge. The research we do here goes everywhere to protect communities threatened by climate change, so you can live your life with fewer worries about tomorrow. We're formulating a better way for everyone, because at LSU, our calling is humanity.
Plants would not be operating if they weren't operating under the regulations to keep everybody safe and keep the environment safe.
It also goes back to the end products that our raw materials go into. Solar panels, windmills.
Reusable bottles. Primary product is acrylonitrile, which is used to make carbon fiber.
Carbon fiber in an airplane is used to make it lighter.
By reducing weight, we indirectly help the environment because it uses less fuel. And for us to make products that help reduce carbon footprint is a big deal.
Shell, the rhythm of Louisiana.
So, how can I help you today?
Maybe you're looking for a bigger home. Maybe you have plans to grow your business. Or maybe all your plans have just changed. For the better. Whether you're planning for the future or just looking for a bank that cares about you. If you have a goal, let's make it happen.
This is what you're looking for.
Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Terry Simmons, one of our state's bright entrepreneurs, is my guest. And we're talking about working for yourself, being an entrepreneur. I know because I'm in the similar line of work, Terry, that I've been discouraged by people over the years. You know, why don't you go? You got a good job there. Why don't you just hang on to that? Have you seen that? Have you heard that? I wonder how many times you've been discouraged.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, you know, being raised by baby boomers, again, they were you get formally educated, you know, you get a job, you stay there for 30 years, and you retire, you get a watch and a pension. And obviously we're in a different financial climate now. I think if there's anything genius that I did early on, it was because I predicted that. Like I predicted that the world was changing, and I didn't necessarily have the information. It was just kind of instinctive. People around me felt like it was a lack of structure, that it wasn't a true career path, and they almost look at it, you know, like it was a hustle. I can remember early on, and I won't say the guy's name, but there was a NFL legend that lived in my community, had a really good relationship with some of his family members, and he had come home and was the recreational director at the time, and I wanted to host an event at one of the parks. And I'm thinking, I know this guy, you know, he's director of the rec center, I'm gonna be able to get it. And he laid into me and told me everything that my company wasn't. And it was discouraging in the moment. You don't have this, you don't have this license, you don't have this legal structure, you don't have this liability insurance. I didn't know anything about any of that. But what it did is it motivated me to go find the answers. So, you know, this is back before the internet, right? So this is Dewey Decimal System, right? I'm in the library with books laid out with coffee and literally researching what's an S Corp, what's an LLC, you know, anything that I could do to learn about how to structure companies. And so it lit a flame in me to make sure that that would never happen to me again, that I would never be in a situation where I was faced with an opportunity and I didn't meet the criteria. So it was always important to me after that to always understand the criteria, to exceed it, and to always position my company as, you know, a world-class organization.
Terry, in any line of business or in any career, there are challenges and there are really good days, right? So in terms of being an entrepreneur, doing what you do daily, talk about the things that are most rewarding to you and then the things that represent the most significant challenges that you face.
Yeah, so based on the nature of what we do, you know, we have two distinct sides of the house, right? So there's this side of the house where we're working very intimately with small to medium-sized business owners. And then over here on the workforce development side, we're working with industry, right? Oil and gas, petrochem. And so the beautiful thing that we do every day that gets me out of bed is that with both of those parallel paths, it sounds cliche, but we're changing lives. I'm seeing that entrepreneur that comes through our doors with a 6-figure business that they're taking to 7 figures, or a 7-figure business that they're taking to 8 figures. They're employing people, they're building a financial legacy for their families, and they're living out their dreams. They're taking what's the thing that they're passionate about, they're monetizing it, and we're giving them the brands and the systems to do it. On the workforce side, hearing from business leaders in Louisiana about, how do we attract, how do we retain talent, how do we develop talent, how do we pipeline talent, I'm able to go into communities that I care about the most. Communities where formal education may not be valued as much, where the educational outcomes may not be great. And I'm able to say, hey, look, I have an alliance with this industry. If you're willing to apply yourself, if you're willing to achieve academically, if you're willing to get the certification, the associate's degree, the master's degree, whatever it is, there's an opportunity in industry for you. And if you're feeling like that opportunity wasn't always there because of who or what you are categorically, then I can be that advocate to hold industry accountable. And so that's what I'm most passionate about, is that and that's the reason why I've stayed in Louisiana my entire life, because for everything that Louisiana isn't, the sense of community that we have, when I walk in Whole Foods or Walmart or Target, I'm seeing the fruits of our labor. I'm seeing that business person that we worked with a couple years ago that's saying we had our best year yet, and it's because of the tools and the creatives that you guys gave us. I'm able to bump into young people that may have gone through, a oil and gas training program that we facilitated 5 years ago, and they're like, I got a Tahoe and a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house and 2 kids, and I'm loving life, and maybe that young person doesn't come from that may not be their pedigree, right? So they're the first generation of, shifting that paradigm. So that's what I'm most passionate about. The most difficult thing is that as an entrepreneur, you have to manufacture a peer group. If you're working in corporate and you're the VP of marketing, you naturally have a peer group. You naturally have a support system. Entrepreneurship, in a lot of cases, leads to a lot of isolation. And, sometimes you celebrate the wins alone. And when you have your darkest moments, we just went through a pandemic where we were all having to reimagine what our businesses look like. Is it still bringing value to the marketplace? Do I need to go in a different direction? And it can be a scary place to be in, because there are people that are paying their mortgages based on decisions that you make. You know how this goes. And as small business owners, we don't get to just look at that like it's metrics. Oh, well, I employed 3,000 people. We're going to downsize and let 400 people go. As a small business owner, you have relationships with those people, their families, their spouses, their kids, their dogs and everybody else. And so you're making a very human decision around personnel. And so that's probably the most challenging thing, is when you wake up, you can't just eat and break the plate. You're always thinking about your team.
You got to remember how many folks are relying on you and what you do. Let's take a break. We come back. I want to talk specifically about T. Simmons and Company and the wonderful services that you provide in the marketplace. We're visiting with Terry Simmons. You're watching the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Welcome back to the Louisiana Business and Industry Show. Terry Simmons of T. Simmons and Company is our guest. So we talked about the life of an entrepreneur, right? And good days and bad days, just like anything else. There are real challenges, but there are times that are really rewarding as well. Let's talk specifically about your firm, T. Simmons and Company, and the services that you provide. Tell us a little bit about that and some of the clients you work with.
So we are a brand development, organizational design, and workforce development firm. And we have two distinct sides of the house, so to speak. So on this side of the house, we work with small to medium-sized businesses, and that is holistic, it's comprehensive. They can come in with an idea, and we can get them to market, and then we can help them to build the brands and the systems that they need in order to be able to scale. Or in some cases, it may be a business that's been around for a decade or so, but they know that they've hit the ceiling. And so they need to rebrand, they need to retool their systems, they need to rethink their strategy, rethink their target market and their approaches. On the industry side, it's very different, right? So it's workforce development. So industries or titans within industries, larger companies come to us and say, hey, look, we're predicting a labor shortage in a particular occupation or in a particular industry, and we want to do something very proactive to circumvent that, right? So it's grassroots, workforce marketing and grassroots programmatic things that we can do to get people in the pipeline.
Well, let's talk about one of those, because one of the things I watch very closely is your work with Dow, right? A major global corporation. Our mutual friend, Stacy Gotro, I know you do a lot of work with those folks. You do something called the Dow Leadership Academy.
Yes.
Just talk briefly about that, Terry.
Yeah, so when we talk about influential people, in my career, Stacy is as influential as they come. I mean, my mom would probably be the only person that would trump that. But so Stacy came to me probably 2016, if I remember correctly. And, Dow is very forward thinking when it comes to building, human capital. The culture in their organization is strong. And they were like, look, we're having diversity and inclusion issues, but we need to do something to cultivate, getting more minorities into the STEM pipeline. And then specifically in occupations that support our operations, obviously. But what I think is unique about the Dow Leadership Academy is that it's not just targeting young people that are interested in STEM. Right. So what Dow is saying is we're going to invest in young people. We're going to invest in their future success. And if we're the beneficiary of it, then great. And so it's a multi-pronged initiative. There's a very strong training component. So it's the same training that maybe some of your corporate clients go through. They're learning about conflict resolution, communication, time management. They're going through financial literacy so they can understand how to manage money. They're going through social graces training. They're learning about different cultures so they can become well-rounded individuals. Then there's a mentoring component where mostly young, emerging professionals in the company, engineers, chemists, process operators, they go through the same trainings. But the beauty in it is that they can lend their life experiences to those young people. So they humanize the lessons.
I can remember when I was where you are.
Absolutely.
Let me tell you what I've done.
Absolutely. So it makes it tangible. And we started with a pilot initiative with the Plaquemine site. It was focused on White Castle. The results of that pilot initiative were through the roof in terms of graduation rates, the number of kids, percentage of kids that went on to college, that went to STEM occupations, through the roof. And so there's been an expansion. So now we have a chapter, there's still a chapter in Plaquemine and White Castle, but now we have one in Hahnville, Louisiana, and we have one in Angleton, Texas, right outside of Houston. Wow. So now we're managing 3 chapters, and it's been a wild ride, but
And so you're helping to change young people's lives, but maybe most importantly, you're helping those young people to change their own lives, right? You're giving them a path to do that, and I think that's incredible. Absolutely. One of the things that's always been fun to watch, Terry, is how your flexible business model allows you to provide great services to a global corporation like Dow, but also provide great services to the young man or young woman who might want to start a barbershop and put the systems together to do that. One of the things that is also very impressive about the work you do is your social media presence. And we got about 2 minutes left. And so I want to get into that because I'm not sure about anyone this side of Gary V who has a more impressive presence on social media than Terry Simmons does. Talk about that evolution and talk about what it's meant to your business.
Yeah, so until about 2014, across all brands, because as you know, we have, a conference that we do every year. We've got a number of brands, right? And I started seeing diminishing returns with traditional media. We were doing outdoor, we were doing print, we were doing broadcast, and we just started seeing diminishing returns. And I stopped looking at social media as a tool to just engage with my high school classmates and my friends. And I started really looking at it as a platform where I could really build a brand. And so the most powerful thing that social media does is that it allows small businesses, number one, to be global. Secondly, you can scale one-to-one relationships. And when you attract an eyeball, if you can continue to put out valuable content that brings value first, right? And so I think a lot of traditionalists in business, what they struggle with is there's not a one-to-one ratio, right? You don't spend the dollar and make three necessarily. You may spend the dollar, 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 and then make 300,000, if that makes any sense. So you don't know when the breakthrough is coming, at least in my line of work, because the types of clients that we're trying to attract, they may be 5% of my audience, but I have to bring value to 100% of my audience to get to the 5%.
We got about a minute left here, so I want to hit a couple of things pretty quickly. Number one, if people want to find you on social media, so they can not just find out about your corporation, but they can sort of model what you've been able to accomplish on social media, where do they find you, and how do they find out more about your company?
Yeah, so I'm easy to find on social media. Terry Simmons on Facebook, Terry G. Simmons Jr. on Instagram, Terry Simmons on LinkedIn. I spend most of my time on Instagram and Facebook because I just like the culture inside of LinkedIn. Gets a little bit too stiff for me. TerrySimmons.com, they can go to that website if they want to learn more about our services and who we work with. Just recently, we just inked a deal with Nucor Steel in St. James Parish. So they'll be doing a very similar leadership academy to what Dow's doing. So that's exciting. So those people out in St. James Parish that might be watching, we're coming to, a town near you, so to speak.
Well, listen, man, as I've said throughout the show, it's impressive to watch. I appreciate the relationship that we've had.
Absolutely.
I've been a real fan of your work for a long, long time.
Likewise.
Keep it up. We'll have you back sometime soon.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it.
You bet. That's a wrap, guys. Thanks for joining us. Join us again next week at this very same time for another edition of the Louisiana Business and Industry Show.